Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. Firstly, my apologies for starting up a little late, technical issues. But in any case, now that we are here with Major General Prabdeep Singh, firstly, sir, namaskar, welcome to the show once again. And on our topic where we started, actually, Ukraine, incidentally, interesting. Life comes down to a circle, sir.
Right. Thank you, Adi. Thank you for having me on the show once again. And yeah, we get back to talking about Ukraine once again. Uh,
Ukraine is in the news, sir.
yes.
Apart from a lot else which is happening domestically, but let's focus on Ukraine for the moment. Sir, first tell me this: this French itch to get into Ukraine. Macron seems to be getting a little bit of a fit or something. NATO wants to go in. Germany is talking about this. I have seen videos of tanks lining up. What in the world is happening, sir? Why does NATO want to get inside this? What has happened?
Okay. Well, today is what? 757th day. Interesting. So 757th day of this war. And definitely the war is taking a little turn. Two things happening. The French, as you mentioned, wanting to get in, uh, talks about some kind of a ceasefire, some kind of a peace deal also emerging, some requests emerging. Russia pushing forth without without any thought of a ceasefire. The Russian fleet, despite having been damaged to a great extent, the war continues. And
Even the Air Force, sir.
yeah, the Air Force. So we have this attack on that Angel Air Base by the Ukrainian drones. So as we see lots are happening, and it's gaining momentum. And we also talk about World War III. Are we actually on the brink of a World War III? We've discussed this issue earlier, much earlier, uh, by then concluding that we are already in a phase that we have stepped into a World War III. Now,
Even
you asked,
General Ryan discussed this today in the afternoon. I'm sorry to interject, sir, and he had the same exact this thing. So you guys have not
yeah,
interacted, but he said the same exact thing that World War III is on. I mean,
yeah,
we're just there.
I
It
think,
started almost 10, 15 years ago when the wars in Africa and this and that started.
yeah. So, but you made this very pertinent question. Why is Macron kind of
Yeah.
jumping? Now, it is very clear, actually, that the Ukrainians have lost. They have lost it badly. They do not have adequate troops who can defend anymore, if I may just put it. And Russia, sooner or later, is going to get a free run to Kiev, at least in the north. And down south, they continue to hold on, and it is, there's going to be a free run to Kiev, and that is what is kind of bothering the rest of the world. Article 5, NATO cannot be invoked. That's precisely the reason. Article 5, because Ukraine is not a member of NATO. So, had Ukraine been a member of NATO, by now we would have seen all these forces already deployed over there, and the war would have taken a different turn. President Zelensky is actually on his knees, openly not begging, can't beg for troops openly, can only openly beg for or request, if I want to be a little decent, request for weapons and request for money, as he's been doing all this while. But then we've seen reports that men no longer exist in this battle. Soldiers, worthwhile soldiers do not exist on the Ukrainian side, whereas on the Russian side, there is no dearth. I mean, Russia may have also lost a large amount of military and to
Especially
bear the cost.
recently, sir.
Yeah. No, you see what happens when you say recently, it is because the more you push, the more casualties will take place. I mean, it's not a free run in any case. War is a costly option, and which Russia has adopted. So the price is in terms of blood of brave Russian and Ukrainian soldiers, if I may just put on both sides. So there is basically a shortage of manpower on the ground, a manpower which is trained. Trained soldiers do not exist. So what has happened? There I'm sure has been a deal worked out by all those who are supporting this war from the Ukraine and supporting the Ukrainians in this war, and they would have come to a conclusion: we just have to change uniforms and send our troops. So slowly and slowly, in a trickle method, the trained soldiers are arriving, and now you want to legitimize that. Because tomorrow, if a French soldier or a German soldier or an American soldier is caught and he's paraded in front of the world through the media, things would become a little, a little nasty for NATO. If the situation is such that Russia presses on all the way to Kiev, what's going to happen? We've always, I have, from the very beginning, I've been saying NATO is losing its relevance. And more so, if this particular aspect happens, NATO loses its relevance. If NATO loses its relevance, the Americans are in a bind. They do not know, they don't have that kind of face to show to the world. And the amount of money which has been spent.
Yeah.
Not
Nobody
funny.
talks about that. Nobody talks about that.
Talks about the money seems to be never in short supply.
Yeah.
I mean, even now they're looking at what EU is disbursed about 4.5 billion euros the other day, right? And the United States is making statements that 76 billion, whatever that has to be passed out of the, that Congress is withholding, will soon get through and all that. So Jake Sullivan has made that remark. So we are coming to the fact that Macron is jumping. He's taken the lead to push for troops on the ground. Germans retracted. If you go by the reports, Germans said no, we are not in favor of troops on ground. German troops will not take part, right? However, the French, he's been talking about sending troops. So maybe this was supposed to be hush hush. Maybe
Macron
this was
spilled the
supposed.
beans.
Yes, Macron spilled the beans in his exuberance, and now it is kind of face saving, retracting, how to go about it. But
Exuberance, or did he play a dirty trick with these guys?
I think it is more of a exuberance. I would not put it as a dirty trick. Or it was, as if it were a dirty trick, then it was actually embarrassing the rest of the people. You see?
I don't care less.
Yeah. I mean, so either way, you have the French, or he wants to take the lead as far as Europe is concerned and say, look, I'm the one who pushed for it. So that's where exuberance comes in.
Yeah.
Now, let's recall, what about a year and a half back, Mariupol, right? In the very beginning, where we knew that there were American soldiers on ground, CIA agents on ground.
They were removed.
We always talked about the planners, the strategic planners, or the people who were the liaison officers who were existing in those bunkers. And if you recollect, one of the hotels was also bombarded, and it was claimed that the foreigners were there, the Americans were there. So this is nothing new. But what is new is troops. If you recollect, there was one of the tank crews also, which was supposed to be, when the Leopards came in, and the Russians claim that the crew was German in Ukrainian uniform. So these kind of things are happening, and well, if Germany is involved, France is involved, the United States is involved, UK is involved in sending troops on ground, we are definitely in the middle of a World War III in of sorts, and
Yeah.
the repercussions of the same are being felt all across Europe. They are being felt in the United States, in the United Kingdom, and of course Russia and China, also though quite not contributing much, is mum about Ukraine to a larger extent. So things are not very good all across. Yeah,
Let's talk
that's how
about
it goes.
China for a second. Let's talk
Yeah,
about China for a second. China said some, standard statement couple of days ago, which is that, oh, we hope for this and that and the other. We hope for peace and tranquility and all that. My point is one thing very,
tranquil.
very simple, sir. Yeah, the Ukrainians told Chinese, and I'd like to quote what exactly they said so that I don't get it wrong. They said China cannot decide when Ukraine and Russia will start talks. They literally spoke for the Russians. And I mean,
Yes,
we'll talk about India later, but here is Zelensky telling Modi, come here, and telling China, shh.
you see, it's interesting because China itself, we've spoken about China, the state of affairs within China. And when we are discussing the state of affairs inside China, it's known to the world that China today is in trouble itself, right? And if China is in trouble, that is once. Two, they came forward initially, very gung-ho and came about with a 12-point peace plan, which
Mhm.
was a theoretical plan, which as I had mentioned, that any what do you call desk officer would just come up with a, a peace plan. You tell a desk officer in Indian Army in the Indian hierarchy and say, "Yeah, come out with a peace plan." He would come out with exactly that standard peace plan, and that is what the Chinese had come about it. It was a totally uh, unthought of, immature kind of a Chinese peace plan, and obviously it never saw the light of the day because it did not have substance. So, as a mediator, China has failed. China is also we are aware that China and Russian ties have increased, have gotten better after the Ukrainian war. China has
Mhm.
also not contributed militarily to the Russians. They may have made a certain amount of supplies and parts, etc., which that's part of your economy and part of your trade agreements. Whether it was the United States or whether it's Russia or China, it doesn't make a difference to them because they are supplying components of various types. So, in that bargain, China has lost relevance as far as this war is concerned. So, the Ukrainians have said, okay, thank you very much. You don't tell us what to do, and we will do what we want to do. And hence, uh, a request to the Indians. And that's what is coming. Yeah.
I mean, that's very interesting because Chinese have they. I wonder why. I mean, it's quite funny when the Chinese actually come in the middle and they try and do all this nonsense. They did it. They've done it twice actually with the Ukrainians and Russians. It's not one time. The first time was when they had that dialogue, peace dialogue,
Correct.
and the second time when you mentioned that they created an envoy and did this and that whole tamasha, one round and it was over. So that's very interesting, sir. But that's where we come to the question of India. Now, funny thing is, Modi Saab has been talking to both these guys, and there has been public statements of it. First statement was during the rescue itself. If you remember when the firing was stopped and the children were removed and this and that, that whole thing was done. So that was probably the starting of the conversations between these guys. What do you think we talk about with them, sir?
Look, let's First, he has to why Modi? Why Prime Minister Modi? Why
Why?
India?
Hmm.
You got to see this also from a perspective, uh, from a global perspective, as to why India. It's very simple. Who could be the key players as far as bringing about peace in this entire game is concerned? It could be the United States. It could be China, right? And then it comes, who else? India. Then there's nobody else. There are no global players in this particular because Russia is involved. So Russia is not the one, right? France and UK are party to the West, and they are stooges of the United States. So obviously, it's the United States which could play a part. Now, can United States play a part at the moment? No. And plain and simple no. For a very very pertinent
Trust.
reason, because elections, they do not, the world doesn't know who's going to win, whether it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump. If Joe Biden comes back, the trajectory of the war is going to be different. If Trump comes to power, the trajectory is going to be at poles apart from what Biden wants or is pursuing. So obviously, if I have to turn to the United States, I will not, because I really do not know what the future of the United States itself.
Hmm.
Second is the China card. China we just discussed, right? While it is the year of elections, there are elections in India as well. But the entire world recognizes this very fact that India is a stable country. It, it lacks a meaningful opposition. And the outcome of the elections is by and large taken for granted. That it will be a continuity and it will be the third term of the present government and under the prime ministership of Mr. Modi, right? So that's certain, or I would say 98% certain. If I may just put the 2% doubt in somebody's mind, if it may be there. So who do you talk to? And India has maintained neutrality all throughout. It has been supporting Ukraine in providing humanitarian aid while boycotting or abstaining from all the UN resolutions against Russia. At the same time, they have been in continuous touch. India and Ukraine have been in continuous touch. There is a lot of trade which goes on between India and Ukraine. And then at the same time, India has maintained good relations with Russia. Oil being an
Hmm.
example. Abstaining in the United Nations is an example. I mean, on 3 different instances, India has abstained. I mean, yeah. So when you look at all these abstainments, in India is considered as a neutral country, a stable and an independent-minded nation. Now, what is prompting Ukraine or Russia to come up and talk to India and bring about peace? Well, the Russians have never requested. Russians have spoken, right? The Russians have spoken about it. I mean, the dialogue between India and Russia, which is a continuous dialogue. What is offbeat is the new dialogue between India and Ukraine,
Hmm.
right?
But I think third call now.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So as I mentioned earlier, we've got an ongoing trade with Ukraine,
Uh,
and it is
Sir, just one
historical.
second. I think you're getting cut off. थोड़ा सा, I think it's just getting a little jerky. Uh, his
Don't know
signal
here.
strength is a little low, sir.
Mic is okay. So maybe I'll go a little slow on this, right? So we're looking at a lot of trade between Ukraine and India. And that
Mm.
must be understood by everybody. It is not that we are going, just getting friendly to Ukraine now. Uh, there was a treaty of friendship and cooperation signed in 1992 between India and Ukraine. The biggest uh, collaboration is in the space domain. ISRO, and they have this space agency called USNOI,
Use now.
right? Then, when we talk of exports in 2023, 22, exports were 41.40 billion worth, and imports by India from Ukraine were worth 60 billion. So there is an ongoing trade, and the trade is, uh, you know, we get our machinery from there, we get our chemicals from there, we
We've
get
actually
things
bought
from
over a certain section of the Antonov plant as well.
yes, the AN-32 upgrade has been done by the Ukrainians,
No, we've bought that
right?
over now. We bought
Yeah.
that one part
So
during the war.
AN-32 upgrade, yeah, 2009 they started it, and it's now perhaps with us. When it comes to what are we exporting? We are exporting pharmaceuticals, minerals, tobacco, tea, coffee, spices, silk, jute, etc., etc. So the point remains, trade is a major issue. And then we've had a summit here in Gujarat. It took place, I think, September last, wherein it was the Ukrainians had come in and they were requesting for investments by India in Ukraine for reconstruction purposes. And they'd given a lot of this thing that we'll, not levy any import duty, etc., etc. The point I'm trying to make is, behind the scenes, it is just not peace talks, right? So it's a lot of collaboration. On the Russian side, of course, being a close friend, Prime
Huge.
Minister Modi, Prime Minister Modi gave a call to President Putin to congratulate him, which is a diplomatic courtesy, and they also discussed the Ukraine war and the need for a diplomatic solution to the end of this war, right? And that has been the principal stance of India, that we diplomacy is the only solution to end this war. So that's how it goes. We are an important player today as far as geopolitics is concerned, and we are
Interesting.
stable. Yeah.
Very interesting. And that's the whole thing. That's a lot of people. We were talking offline. A lot of people keep saying, "Oh, we've not done anything. Foreign policy is useless. There's that, Evo." Not being political, but we need to understand that there is a very clear. This is not something that Modi sir asked for. कि साहब मेरे को बुलाओ.
Sure.
They are saying साहब आ जाओ. And interestingly, sir, if you remember when Jaishankar ji had gone to Moscow, Putin's statement was that it will be nice to have Prime Minister Modi after the election so that we can discuss the war with him.
Yeah.
So he had said it in back in December.
You see, India-Russia relations are historic. They are very, very solid. Not that we've discussed this earlier. Our friendship with America, with Russia, is important, and we since we exercise strategic autonomy, and we believe on issue based and principled stances, that's why we are respected. India is respected for all that.
It's very interesting actually. When and this was nobody foresaw this कि कहीं से ऐसा कुछ आएगा. It's quite a hard this thing. Lastly, sir, before we get into, there are loads of audience, very interesting audience questions, and they basically guys are asking stuff from all directions, so that's very interesting. So Ukraine actually said that they would want India to be a part of that Switzerland peace conference. So and this is India and one other country they nominated to be a part of that was I forget. There were two countries that they've nominated. If I'm not mistaken,
France.
and
France.
France. So, uh, how does this kind of fit well? Because this whole peace conference is something that we've kind of seen multiple times before. Is that one of the solutions again? It's
You see, let's get it right. You can bring about any solution. Uh, Peace will only be brought can only be brought about when both parties to the war sit down together and put across their points, their stances. The stances are very clear today. I mean, we know the Ukrainian stance, we know the Russian stance, right?
yeah.
The Ukrainians, what they're asking, they have a very fixed 3-point agenda. Russia has to withdraw unilaterally, it has to go back. Boundaries have to be restored to 1991 status, whatever existed,
Eh,
right? Will that happen?
Never.
Will Russia agree to it? It's not going to happen. Russia has also put forth this points. Crimea, forget it. Donbass, forget it. Right?
Actually, in that interview with Tucker, he said the four provinces we've taken. He didn't say these words, but he said these words. You know what I
Yeah.
mean.
So if we think uh, that President Putin is going to agree to what Ukraine wants, not going to happen. But yes, what could go back is to the Minsk, you know.
Which is why this war started in the first place.
Yes, courtesy Boris Johnson, right?
Yeah,
So if you go back to Minsk too, that
it'll be
is where
Minsk
they're
to minus these areas, right? So
no Minsk too included. I mean, all this what has happened, Donbas area and Russian speaking Crimea, this that. So that allowed a certain amount of it kind of appeased, suited the Russians as well as the Ukrainians. Now, if you're going to go back to Minsk too, because that was kind of agreed, right? Both had agreed neutrality. Both had agreed certain areas to be given to Russia because they were Russian speaking. So if that is going to come, that's perhaps the only solution in my opinion, because that was kind of mutually agreed, and Boris Johnson played spoil sport.
yeah, I think
Now,
रशिया ने जो लैंड ले लिया है सर वो तो वापस देगा नहीं.
वो तो वापस होने वाला नहीं है, वो वापस होने वाला नहीं है, उससे ज्यादा लेके जाएगा.
Yeah,
ठीक है. Now,
yeah.
my take on this is there's one issue we're not talking about is the Arctic, right?
Actually, there was something I noted down for your next week discussion.
All
The
right. So
Arctic
we'll
war.
discuss this next. We'll discuss it next week.
That's something
We'll
I had
discuss
noted
it
down.
because
Yeah, something you and I had actually floated in the first place, and
yes,
then we need to kind of take it forward.
no, because that's an important aspect as to why this war is being prolonged. Uh, why NATO has expanded even further. So we can discuss this last
Yeah,
in the next this thing, because it's important for everybody to
very.
understand, and I would like to put across my views, whatever I've gained.
And we are there in the smack dab in the middle of it.
Absolutely.
Uh, As far as I know, sir, and this is hush hush, but as far as I know, some of our merchant sailors are already doing ice training in Russia. So
No, that is there because Antarctica. We've got our mission in Antarctica. We've got our stations which are existing, Gangotri and all that. So we are not strangers to this kind of area.
sir,
Now we'll discuss this next time. Yeah.
yes, sir. So, guys, please like this video, subscribe to the channel. Most importantly, spread the word. We just crossed 175,000. Thank you so much, all of you guys. Uh, it's a great pleasure being with all of you. Let me say this, and of course, I'm still yet to work out the mathematics for the next target. So I will do that and let you guys know. But most importantly, just share these videos with your friends and family, whoever's interested in geopolitics. You can also contribute towards this channel using the QR code or the PayPal link in the description, or you can use the option of super stickers or super chats or becoming a member as well. Let's see what you guys have to say. Loads of interesting comments, I must say. Today the questions are going to be very, very twisty. uh, right, let's see the first one. Yeah, Supersonic Diesel, thank you so much for your contribution. And he says, sir, is US letting in illegals to fight World War III? Now, this is something I've also said, because a couple of senators have put this across, saying service for citizenship.
No, that
There
that
is a
that that is no,
there is a
that
reason why
exists.
you're getting military aged men.
You see, this illegal thing. Uh, let's go back to the Afghanistan war. I mean, whatever happened in Afghanistan. We know that a lot of people got enlisted into the U.S. Armed Forces for green cards. Simple as that. So, I mean, if you are illegal and you join the armed forces and you get a green card, and they have this, minimum service that you got to do. Maybe it's, I think, it's 2 years or 4 years. I'm not very sure,
Two,
but
three.
3 years. So, if you do your 3 years of service, you get your green card. Well, our younger generation is quite crazy, whether it is Indians or whether it's the Mexicans or whether it's the Africans who want to get in the United States. So, yeah, that's it. It exists.
Could be possible.
Russia is also doing the same. They wanted Nepalese, they want Indians.
Yeah, Nepalese have said, ना हम नहीं जा रहे. ये बहुत गंदी लड़ाई है. They're running back, so Dr. MPC says, thank you so much. Firstly, sir, if Biden chooses Michelle as his vice president, can he win?
I can't say. And I really would not comment because till such time the Michelle has chosen as the running mate, I really cannot say. And when it
But
comes to winning, yeah, bolo.
there are rumors about it.
Yeah, that's why he's made the statement. I'm playing it that way. I'm not taking the rumor. This thing. Yeah, that could be a that could be a trump card up Biden's sleeve if he wants to do that.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I think it may not happen. Yeah.
Abhishek ji, thank you so much for becoming a member. Dipankar says, ask, Kiev ab dur nahi.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल दूर नहीं है. You see what happens in a battle. There's a defensive line. There's the first defensive line. In front of the defensive line, there are a lot of obstacles. And once you breach the first defensive line, then there'll be a second defensive line, which is weaker than the first, because the first is the most strengthened one. The second one is less strengthened. And if you breach the second line, then you have hasty defenses, because those are being built, or those defensive positions are being created uh, in a very hasty manner, and which can be easily overrun. So the deeper you go and you break that bit, if you are if you're broken in the second tier, then you're gone. Then it's a smooth run, as long as your logistics are okay. The main thing when it happens is, people forget the logistics part of it. The logistics chain has to be made very, very secure, because if you've got to move tanks, well, you need fuel for tanks. If you've got to move troops, you need the khana pani for the troops. If you've got to move guns, you need ammunition. So if you've got to cross obstacles, you need your bridging trains, etc. So until or unless your tail is very, very, the tail is, well organized. And if it is, then cave is certainly not dur.
Ji. So, a connected question to one of the superchats first. If European men will go to fight Russians, Europe is full of illegal immigrants. They're going to cause havoc. Europe recovered after World War II. This time will be difficult.
Yeah, it is going to be, as it is, it's difficult for the Europeans.
Yeah.
And what is Europe looking at? Europe today, I mean, white supremacy, white supremacists, Islamophobia, Islamists, all that is now kind of taken center stage in Europe. You couple that with the economic decline. I mean, a recipe for disaster. And
Exactly.
if they get involved into war, I mean, let's conjure a situation where the frontline troops have entered or are there fighting, and at the back are white supremacists and Islamists, and there is economic, disaster, which is, as it is on the brink of disaster. So the economy has gone down. So you can imagine what kind of a havoc situation Europe is going to be in.
Yeah.
It's logical. It's going to happen.
True, sir.
Yep.
Rajesh ji says, what are the figures of casualty, both military and civilian on both sides?
Unknown.
750,000?
You say,
750,000 for Ukraine?
these are, we talk 750,000. Russian figures being given by the Ukrainians were 443,000. And I'm talking today's figures.
I think Russians have
So,
lost 100,000 and these guys have lost.
so there is a lot of variation and claims on both sides. Somehow, this is one aspect which is not coming out very clear, and it's based on guesstimates.
So, how long can NATO supply arms to
How
Ukraine?
long can NATO supply? NATO can only supply to a limited extent, and that is the main cause of worry, because just remember, when the war broke out, a lot of arms were being supplied. Now, I've stated this in earlier talks, every country has got its basic component for its armed forces to defend itself. To defend your own country, you've got a basic component, right? Then you got a first line of reserves, and then you got the second line of reserves. Second line of reserves is like maybe 30 days behind. The first line of reserve maybe just 15 days behind. So all that what was in the reserve was given first. Obviously, nobody's going to give what you're using, right? So they're going to give something from your reserves, which is obsolete or which is reserve, which is to be used maybe later, much later. So that has been provided. Perhaps the second line, whatever was maintained, has also been provided. And no country is going to give you the first line, because they need, after all, if they have to fight tomorrow, if Russia is knocking at the doors of Poland or Germany, they need their weapons, they need their equipment. So they're not going to give that. So how long? We already know that fatigue has set in. The industrial corporation, industrial complex is unable to provide in the degree that they want, the Ukrainians want. So there's already a shortage. Maybe last another 6 months, 1 year. And perhaps, if I may just put it, that is why Macron is making this statement. They want to get into the war, because है ही नहीं अभी कुछ देने के लिए.
हम ही चले जाते हैं यार. मैं
हम
वही
ही
बोल
चले
रहा हूँ सर,
जाते
ये मेरे को ना, मैं सुबह आई वाज थिंकिंग यार, ये मैक्रोन ना बदमाशी तो नहीं कर रहा. इसने जो पूरा सीक्रेट सो कॉल्ड प्लान था पूरा लीक कर दिया.
वही करेंगे, बिकॉज अभी हमारे पास, अभी देखो हमारे पास देने के लिए कुछ है नहीं. जब है ही नहीं कुछ, तो अभी हमको ही
मैं जा
करना
रहा
पड़ेगा ना.
हूँ.
हाँ, अगर मैं नहीं जाऊंगा तो वो हमारे पास आ जाएगा.
But it's an interesting way also, if you, because he's gone up and said कि भाई मैं जा रहा हूँ, ठीक है, दुनिया बोलेगी बेवकूफ, ना 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 मत जा मत जा मत जा मत जा मत जा, ठहर ठहर. It's a good way of bringing some sort of a jerk to the entire system.
Yeah, I mean, it could, these kind
You
of
could look at
things,
it in multiple ways.
these kind of statements have to be also viewed as managing,
Perceptions.
changing the narrative, throwing caution to the winds. That the Russians throwing, caution to the Russians, say that, look, we will get involved if you don't stop now. If you
Yeah.
stop now, agree to a peace plan, then we will not get in. It's like it's pressure tactics. These kind of games are played at the strategic level.
Yeah. I mean, look at it. We are talking Ukraine after a year almost, so it's not all about 4-5 months. So it brought Ukraine back on the map.
Yeah.
Then fatafat conversations have happened. People have started already writing this, that, so it brought the thing back on the map. So it's an interesting thing, sir. So two-part question. So just bear with me, Dr. MPCG. Thank you so much. He says, so what are the second, third order effects of a Russian takeover / victory on the West and the rest of the world? And in hindsight, what could the Russians have done differently in the beginning to have a quick victory? Was that not possible in your opinion? Thank you so much for your contributions.
So let's take the second one first. We do agree, and we must fully accept the fact that the Russians committed a blunder in the manner they executed the operations.
True.
They misread. On their part, I would just put it as an intelligence failure, a strategic intelligence failure. They did not comprehend, they did not visualize the reaction which would come from the Ukrainian side, as also from the international body. I mean, countries, other nations. So it was thought to be a cakewalk. While it came in all the way from Belarus and also from this thing. But then they quickly, after they suffered a large amount of casualties,
Backwalk.
They retreated. They made a strategic, retreat. They regrouped, and I would commend that. I mean, after they took the initial brunt, they did not hesitate in breaking contact, getting back, getting fixed lines established. I mean, the defenses were prepared, and then they held on to the defenses initially. Meanwhile, they prepared, and the outcome is in front of you. So the initial factor was a blunder, was an operation not well executed. The strategic retreat was a wise decision. The regrouping was again done in a very, very military, like fashion. I would put it this way: the use of Wagner forces was also I would say not a master stroke, but a very good tactical maneuver, if I may just put it, putting the Wagner in front while they were regrouping. While they were, you put paramilitary forces, you put what do you call ragtag forces in front. They are fighting. You get the prisoners to fight while you regroup. So I think they did it well. And what is the first one?
What are the second, third order effects of a Russian victory, sir?
Yeah. Now, firstly, you got to measure victory. How do you measure victory in this particular war? Are you looking at complete takeover of Ukraine?
I don't think even the Russians want that.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, I always claim the Dnieper River line.
Yeah.
Right. So, and Kiev is kind of straddles both sides of Kiev. Straddles the Dnieper River on both sides. So we're looking at we're looking at that particular line. Or today, if you just look at it, does the entire capture and holding of the Donbass or the four oblasts good enough, along with Crimea and Odessa and all that? So if we can do that, should we constitute that as a victory?
Yeah.
If we do, that this is Russia is victorious, it has achieved its war aims. Well, what are the effects? The effect of this entire war is very, very simple. NATO has not been able to provide adequate, it loses its teeth. Right? Tomorrow, if Russia were to, attack, Poland may be prepared, but if they were supposed to attack one of these smaller nations, and if it was to grab, if Moldova was also to be a party to it, all that, I think the faith of the European countries in NATO has definitely diminished. The faith of the people definitely diminished, if not totally gone.
That for sure. That for sure, sir.
Right? But what has the NATO been able to achieve is the expansion, adding up of two more countries, the implications of which we will discuss in the next episode. Yeah.
Refocus and expansion, I would say, sir.
Yeah.
Raviraj asked an interesting question, sir. Seeking the present scenario, do you see China can jump in the war side as Russia, pushed in the corner by the West, find more tough to attack Taiwan or India? There was a statement from somebody in China saying that China will come to Russia's aid if NATO attacks.
Yeah, I also read that, but not happening. No, there is a if you study the China-Russian equation also, then you will find and discover that all is not hunky-dory between the two countries. There is a lot of strategic competition which exists. So if you think China is going to jump into the fray, not happening.
Mm-hmm.
China will safeguard its economic interest, period. Till date, it hasn't. Till date, it has not jumped into any war. How are we expecting them?
Sir, Dr. MPC, once again, thank you so much. He says, sir, is the World War III going to be without nukes?
Interesting question. It will end with the nuke, maybe.
Like the last one.
Yeah.
Two parts, sir. RMS says, General Saab, Russian threatened to kill French soldiers if their boots on the ground in Ukraine. Hungary said to block EU plans to use of interest payments on frozen Russian assets to fund the war in Ukraine. Putin says, hey, we need that fund in the war too.
Yeah, obviously. They're looking at this particular thing about funds. The interesting thing that came about today was they're planning to utilize 2 to 3 billion dollars of these funds every year to fund this war.
Yeah.
To fund this war every year means pata nahi kab tak chalega ye ladai, right? Chalne do. Now that is one aspect. Obviously, Russia is not going to agree to it, and Hungary is kind of very, very clear about all these things. And I must admit that Hungary is one spoiled spot as far as NATO is concerned. It's keeping them in check, because if Hungary was not there, things would be kind of different. The second thing is French troops. Obviously, the French troops will be killed. Russia is not going to spare. You're fighting against me, and just too bad. I'm going to knock you off. Whether you're French or you're German or you're British, you're fighting me. So I will do anything in my power to stop any movement of your troops into the battle zone.
Absolutely. Dr. MPC, once again, thank you so much. Sir, Hamas attack seems to have been better ISR and operational acumen than the Russian action. Why is it so? Hamas was supported by China. That's why.
No, this was planned for many years. So this was thought of as far as Hamas actions are concerned. All that tunneling by the Chinese and making all underground wherewithal with Chinese help, everything. But it was taking place over a period of time. And the interesting part of it is that the Israelis were caught unawares,
Yeah,
and their intelligence is supposed to be was supposed to be one of the best in the world, and
I say
their
the same thing.
and all their systems, the electronic systems. I think they rely too much on technology, and they were parting on the other side. So obviously, technology failed them at a certain time.
And technology, that too from China. So there you go.
Mm.
Jays, the Ukrainians who fled to the UK ever want to return to the ravaged Ukraine?
Would you return from UK if you were given a chance to be in UK?
UK, okay, sir. I mean,
No, no, I'm
but
just
UK
saying.
to Ukraine,
No, no, I know you. I'm just making a statement that anybody who's without aspiring to go to UK is given a place in UK and say, "Come and stay here." Would you want to go back?
हाँ, वो फ्री के पैसे
So,
देते हैं वहां पर तो.
and then fighting. And why UK? They're not going back. That's the biggest problem in Europe today. The Ukrainians have become a burden on the European nations. They are demanding. The tragedy of the whole thing is, while they're refugees, they are demanding facilities, and they are also engaging in unlawful, activities.
Yeah.
So when all that is happening, they're not going to get back. Anybody who's moved out of Ukraine today, 80% is not coming back. Rest be assured.
Batraji says, is Ukraine also a friend of Ukraine? Is also a friend of Pakistan. It supplies tanks and other military equipment to Pakistan. Could we put this as a condition to mediate between Russia and Ukraine, especially to Ukraine?
Nada. And because while the Ukrainians have supplied tanks to Pakistan, Pakistan has assisted Ukraine, has sent artillery ammunition to Ukraine, which was incidentally lifted on board a Royal Air Force aircraft, which came, landed,
C-17.
took. Yeah. So India exercises its options and doesn't kind of mingle, doesn't want to interfere. But what Ukraine-Pakistan relations are different, India-Ukraine relations are different, and you don't want to spoil them just because of a unruly neighbor like Pakistan. Yes, it could be a condition tomorrow when we have an upper hand, or we have contributed meaningfully towards it.
Sorry. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Is the West willing to stand behind Bharat for a peace plan? Is the West willing to lift sanctions on Russia before peace is in place? Is the West, when West is pumping man, machine, and money, is it possible?
Not possible. Plain and simple. The West, the West does not want the war to end, because if they wanted the war to end, it would have ended long time back.
Sir.
It is the military-industrial complex which does not want this war to end, and it wants the war to be prolonged, and the ramifications. I mean, whole aim is what? We will not let Russia win. Right? The entire premise of this war is to downgrade Russian economic and military might. If that is the premise of the entire war, if that was the premise of the entire, pushing NATO eastwards and bringing it onto the borders of Russia, that's the premise.
Sir,
So how will the war end, and how will they favor a peace plan, and why should they?
sir. Anuish, thank you so much. He says deep state wanted to fund Ukraine. Putin's POV.
Absolutely, deep state is funding. Wanted to, yeah, it's funding.
Hardcore funding. Dr. Saab, thank you so much. Once again, says is Macron talking about sending French Foreign Legion or regular troops? Can Russia consider FFF as NATO troops? That's interesting,
Absolutely.
actually. That's an interesting twist.
You
French Foreign
see,
Legion does not belong to France, but belongs to France, you know. So,
so we shall see, because if they're going to put the foreign legion there, in any case, Ukraine had this foreign legion corps, and where all the foreigners were being recruited and made to fight. We know of that. In
yeah.
that also, we know that many of them were serving and many of them were retired. I mean, it's so easy. You just have to give him an I card and say that he's a retired, he's a veteran. He used to serve in the armed forces earlier, but then he's a trained soldier.
So,
So, as far as FFF is concerned, uh, Russia is concerned, they are French troops, whosoever they are. How does it matter? I mean, it is same as Wagner being considered as Russian forces.
true. War is European problem and not India problem. Absolutely correct.
This is the best statement that you have made, my friend. And that is the premise that India has held all this while.
Yeah, yeah.
And while we want peace, it's not our major problem.
So, Naveen Bhatia ji says there's no intention of peace between the USA and Russia. Ukraine does not matter.
It never mattered. Ukrainian lives did not matter. They do not matter. Ukrainian lives do not matter to their own president. This
you
gentleman is
you gotta
destroyed.
you gotta start a new hashtag revolution. So Ukraine doesn't matter.
Yeah, Ukraine lives, if they mattered or Ukraine mattered, this war wouldn't have taken place. Zelensky should not have agreed to this war, period.
Sickening, sickening, absolutely sickening. Partha's interesting question, and I'd have a little bit of an answer. So if you allow me as well.
Yeah.
Zelensky being a Jew and India's role in October 7 impact the way Zelensky thinks. How does one explain the anti Semites in Ukraine then?
You answer.
I don't think so. Point number one, because the anti Semites in Ukraine are focused towards Russia. They find Slavs, Russian as the Jews of Europe of 1930s. Okay, so anti Semitism to them and the hardcore Nazism to them is an anti-Russian Nazism. It's not an anti-Jew Nazism. That's what a lot of people have failed to understand about the Ukrainian right-wing movement. They are not anti-Jews because there are a lot of Jews in Ukraine, which are part of the hardcore Nazi movement. Correct me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong, sir.
Yeah, absolutely, because you got a hardcore Nazi movement, and at the same time you got the Jews there, and they're a part of it. So
They're
this is
part of
this
it.
is so the outlook is different, as explained by you.
So, Lajwanti ji says, how does Ukraine get to choose who mediates peace talks? I don't think this has ever happened in history. It's about trust on both the sides.
When you are actually in deep trouble,
You take anything that comes.
डूबते को तिनके का सहारा. So you're looking for that, stable tinka which will actually hold on to you and be of assistance to
Yeah.
you. China is not going to be there. US is already there with you. As we talked about, who's the neutral player in this? Who's the most unique, neutral, trustworthy global leader? So there you are. And
As a com-
And of course, Ukraine doesn't get to choose. But then, if Ukraine also understands that India is respected uh, by the Russians, and the Russians and Indians have an equation which can come into play.
A counter to that, sir, says, what if Zelensky is approaching Bharat only to make break Bharat-Russia relations a bit, not actually because he wants peace? France, we've already discussed.
Yeah, this is a far-fetched take. Uh, I mean, what does Zelensky get by breaking the Bharat-Russian relations? Bharat-Russian relations are on a solid footing until unless, if the United States had mooted this idea, it would perhaps be different.
Correct.
So Zelensky is, yeah, you can say at the same time that Zelensky is a pawn as far as the West is concerned. But I think it's more out of respect and not because of this particular reason.
Uh, Sir, I'm going to just take one comment, which is a funny one,
Yeah.
just to break the monotony a little bit. And this is obviously not about, this is the, so Ukraine is the Pakistan of Europe. This is the real Pakistan. And I must say, this is a very interesting question. I can't help putting this up. Cyberpunk, my friend Cyberpunk says, Pakistan's Karachi fab facility will start manufacturing 5 nanometer chips by the end of the year, slightly salted with chili flavors.
Okay. Let's see how much of 5 million chips they will start making.
I couldn't resist myself. That is comment of the day, buddy. I mean, this was fantastic.
Yeah.
Jay says, so maybe France and EU wants Ukraine, whatever remains, to be merged with Poland or Hungary or Romania or Slovakia or Moldova.
Now you're making a very, very, you're taking me back to what we've been talking about, trifurcation.
Yeah.
So let us not forget the trifurcation uh, of Ukraine, which may happen or which may be a
Mm.
part of the peace deal or which may also be forced upon Ukraine. So merger with Poland fully no, partial yes.
Hmm.
We're
And
talking
वैसे
about
भी sir, see, yeah, I mean, whatever if our perspective is, we're not going there for anything else. If they want to sit and talk, fair enough, we'll talk. It's not like, oh, please, please, please sit with us. It's not like that. We don't
Mhm.
care. You can keep fighting for kingdom come यार हमको क्या फर्क पड़ता है.
No,
You are
no.
saying come here, we'll talk. Fair enough, I'll come there, we'll talk. You
You
come
see,
to a ground footing, fair enough. Okay.
as a global player and as an emerging, as a growing economy, and with a kind of respect which India maintains and hold it has on the global south. India is definitely the best suited country for bringing about peace. But peace, as we all know, has to be brought about when both sides agree to something and there is a compromise. Peace will only be brought about by a compromise and stance on both sides.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't happen, anybody can come and mediate. There's going to be no outcome. Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful note to end the discussion on, sir. I think that's a very pragmatic thing that one has to look at before talking about an end to a situation. And as I said, we don't need to invest that much of our political capital. If they are interested, then you can put in some capital. Otherwise, fair enough. Meet them, greet them, seat them, and out you go. You know, you're not wanting to stick your nose into something which will hurt you in the future. So that's you got to look at your own interests as well. I think that will be always there at the top of mind of anybody who would want to go there. I, you
Absolutely.
know, right, sir. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure talking to you, and we shall see you for the discussion on the Arctic. That's something I am looking forward for because the Arctic routes are opening up, and you know, as to all of you guys, as part of this discussion, I will try and see if I can come up with a map or something like that, which will, you know, kind of cover
Yeah,
the.
I have the map.
Yeah, so we could do that, and complete the picture of Bharat's future trade routes. And yes, as anti SWA says, please put in Jai Bharat or whatever comment you love in the comment box. You all know YouTube is a bit slow in India right now. Your comments and your likes helps the channel grow and over counter the the sort of slowdown which has been put up. Thank you so much. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, viewers.